so many things. It keeps us entangled in so many ways that the things that Jesus wants us to do, fear robs that. So I want you to sit there with your eyes closed and your heads bowed, and I want you to think about some things maybe that you're dealing with right now that's got you scared to death. That's got you in a position in your life, that's got you in a moment in your life that you would say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I can't go any further. Because fear has entangled everything in me. Fear has entangled every thought, every attitude, every word, everything in my mind and in my spirit. Fear has entangled. And I want you to think about those things and think about what would God say about that. And what does God say about that? And many times we get so stuck in that we can't go on and do the things that God calls us to do. I've been there. Okay, you can go ahead and raise your heads, open your eyes, and if you'll look around in the seats beside you, what do you see? You see fear. Just as the video said, that many times we don't understand that fear grips us and tangles us, and we don't understand that fear is with us everywhere we go. Amen? Many times we get so stuck by what that fear does to us, and we don't understand that because we're in church, that fear can still be here with us. That fear can entrap us, and fear can entangle our thoughts and our minds. But I made that video. I ran across that script, and I thought, man, that hit home. Because so many times that's where I'm at. Fear holds me back from so many things. Fear holds us all back from so many things. But before we get started in the message, I want to share some things. I always, if you know me enough, I like to kind of be funny, take the edge off a little bit. But I got to thinking about phobias. Who has some phobias? I've got a wife and a daughter that has arachnophobia in probably the worst way. Like they'll make me come home from work to kill a spider. But we probably, when you really think about it, we all have phobias, right? We all have something that we're afraid of. But I kind of looked at a list. I was like, Google's a wonderful thing. You can type it in and go, funny phobias. And I just ran across, I'm not going to read them all because some of them I couldn't pronounce. But some of them were funny, and I'll share them with you. But how about, and you'll have to bear with me because none of them are easy, okay? How about, I'm going to say this, xanthiophobia, which is the fear of the color yellow. I mean, I don't quite understand that. I'm not sure what they did when they had to ride the school bus, but maybe their parents got them to school. I don't know, or what do they do when they see a school bus? Who knows? So anyway. All right. Turophobia, the fear of cheese. That's not me. I love cheese on everything. I mean, I could eat cheese on ice cream. If I could figure out a way to melt the cheese on the ice cream, it'd be great, but can't do that. How about somniophobia, fear of falling asleep? I don't fear that either. I can go to sleep pretty easily. Sometimes I wonder, am I ever going to sleep? But that's not the fear of sleep. It's the fear of that I can't go to sleep, right? How about coulrophobia? That's the fear of clowns. I know there's some that have a fear of clowns. That is a true fear. I understand that. How about hylophobia? The fear of trees. Okay? I kind of chuckled at this one because as I look at the name of it, nomophobia. Okay? All right, listen to what it's the fear of. The fear of being without mobile phone coverage. You could reword that and say no more phonia. I'm just saying, But I think, honestly, we're all in that, right? I mean, we get so wrapped up and frustrated when we have no service on our phone, right? I mean, at home, I have very little service at home. If you call me at home, there's chances are that I probably won't answer if you're calling my cell phone because I don't have service. I'll get the phone call tomorrow whenever you probably don't need me anymore. But that's beside the point. And let's see, the last one. And I'm sure there probably are people that fear this. I hope not because I have one. How about pogonophobia? That is the fear of beards. Hey, I don't know. I didn't make these up. I looked them up, okay? So it's not on me. I didn't make these things up. So, but you see, we have so much fear in our lives. We have so much fear in this world. We have so much fear that we have to overcome. And today I want to talk. We kind of did a thing this whole month of October in the youth where our theme was triumph. And what we're triumphing over our fears. We talked. We had some themes and superhero themes, and we had a great time with it. But it was hopefully something that I could teach the kids, and we could teach through games and just have a lot of fun with it, where we could learn to overcome those fears. I don't think you're ever going to have anybody that's truly fearless. I've entitled this message, not fearless like as in being, I'm fearless of everything, but how about fearless? Can we not probably fear less? Yes, we can. Because if we know who God is and who He is in us, then we have the capability of fearing less. Okay? So we have to understand that. And as I was trying to decide, because if you look in the book of Daniel, I've been in the book of Daniel a lot this month, because if you look at the book of Daniel, there's a lot of, what I would have to say is a lot of fear in that book. When you look at the things that they had to deal with, Daniel in the lion's den. What I'm going to talk about today is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The three young boys that probably faced as much fear, I would have to assume. When you read the story, it didn't say anything about how fearful they were, but you have to assume that they were entangled in fear when that moment came. But so we're going to be in Daniel 3. I'm going to kind of unpack, because I'm not going to start at the very beginning of this chapter, just because it's a long chapter, and I would struggle reading that much at one time. So, but I want to just kind of unpack kind of what's going on. King Nebuchadnezzar, he's made an image, right? And it says this image is 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. That's how it starts out. He's taken this and he's put this out there, and he said, whoever doesn't bow down to my image, you will be thrown into this blazing furnace, right? There's these three guys that were very close friends to Daniel. They were on his board of, director, whatever you want to call it. They were on his board of higher ups. So when we look at this, and some of the unpacking I did on it is, when we look at this as the Babylonians, what they did, they took these people and they put them in training for 3 years to train them up to. For what I would say, they really brainwash them into thinking that he is the king, that the King Nebuchadnezzar is the king. They go as far as changing the names, because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was not their original names. That wasn't their God-given names. That was their Babylonian names. Their original names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So how much does that look like us today? See, we get so entangled in the world, and the world wants us to change our identity to adapt to what they want us to be. Okay? So we're looking at a time thousands of years ago where they were still trying to do the same thing that the world tries to do to us right now. They try to change our names and our identities and make us believe we're someone we're not. But it's up to us whether we choose that or not. We have a choice, right? And they had a choice in this. So we're going to talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There'll be a time, maybe a few times in here where I might say we're going to talk about Shad or Shaq or Abe just because it's easier, right? But when we look at these guys, they were truly men of promise, right? They had higher positions. They had kind of worked their way up through the chain. They were in higher positions in the king's courtship, and they were in a pretty powerful nation at this time. Here their hearts were full of hopes and dreams. We're going to pick this up in verses 14 and 18, and we're going to read a little bit, and I'll read a little bit. We'll go back and we'll kind of unpack it just to kind of make sense on this. But I'm excited for this message. It's so good to see God's Word come alive. How it can relate to us, how we can apply it to our lives. And again, you think about this was thousands of years ago, and everything they're talking about here, we still experience today. And it's so amazing how God's Word is so real. So we're going to pick up in verses 14 through 18. And it says, And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and He will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if He does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Now, how big a guys were these guys when they said, "We don't care what you do to us, we don't care what we have to go through, but we're going to continue to serve the God that we serve. We're not serving some form of false idol. We're not going to serve anything that you say. We believe in the God that we serve. We are fearless enough to know that we're going to serve the God that we serve." So what really sticks out to me in this story when we read it is that the moment inevitably comes when somebody realizes that death is inescapable, right? And there's nothing that they can do. Often the last message is an expression of regret at having to leave this life. How many of you have known, and unfortunately we're going to experience where we have family members where they're in their last moments. And how many of you know that I've been there, that they always have regrets? You know, I wish I would have done this. Man, I wish I would have done this. Even we have those regrets. You know, maybe it's a parent or a loved one and we say, "Man, I wish I'd have spent more time with them." Or, you know, "Man, I wish I'd have just done this." Or, you know, "I wish I'd have," you know, for me, I'd say, "Man, I wish I'd have just jumped out of that airplane whenever somebody told me to go jump out of an airplane." Well, maybe not. Somebody'd have to push me out of an airplane. That's probably on a bucket list, but that's beside the point. But how many times do we do that? We have those regrets. We have those times that we get so regretful. And for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, death is escapable. All they have to do is bend their knee, bow down to this golden image. It's escapable. He's already given them a choice. He said, "You can either do this, or I send you to the furnace." He's given them a choice. You know, they when you think about that, they would restore their power. Everything is going to stay the same. They don't lose anything. But they hold their ground. They understand that even though they're headed towards unimaginable pain and death, and that really one word is life for them, they continue to keep their focus on God. They continue to keep their mind and their eyes on Jesus. That kind of devotion to God is possible for ordinary people, us. When we think about that kind of devotion to Him, it's possible for us. We just have to understand that we can't let fear entangle us so much that we're not willing to do the work that the Lord's called us to do. Looking back at myself 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have told you that I did not want to stand up in front of a church. I'm not worthy enough to stand in front of a church and preach His gospel. Because I had turned my back on Him and I had spit in His face and I said, "There's no way He can use an ordinary man like me." But that was fear that entangled me because I said, "I don't know what that looks like. I know what my life looks like. I know what life I live. I know that I control what goes on in my life, and I don't have to really answer to anybody except for my wife and my daughter," which I didn't do a lot at that time. But I knew what I could control. But I also know now that God's called me to something much, much greater. And I can't let that fear of being up here to share His word, because it's not about me. It's all about Him. It's all about who He is in and through me. And they continue to say, "The God we serve is able to save us. But even if He does not, we want you to know, King, that we will not serve your gods and worship the image of gold that you have set up." So it looked like their final words were, "You know what? I don't know what else to tell you, King. because it's not working for me. So I guess what I've got to say with that is, whatever in this moment and in this life that you're going through, whether it be sickness, job, your job loss, a divorce, a battling time, a trying time in your life, whatever that may be you are going through, you have to be sure and understand that it may take my physical abilities, it may take my family, it may take the job I have, it may take the vehicles I own, it may take my finances. And we always have to pray that things will get better for us, right? We have to pray that things are going to get better for me. And we have to understand, but I'll tell you this, Lord, if it does not, I will not quit. I will not give up. We have to have that mindset. We have to have that faith in God to know that whatever the struggles that we're going through, the Lord has ordained at such a time as this. That we have to understand that He's with us, He's going with us, He's gone before us, and He understands where we're at. So many times we want to make understanding of ourselves, or we want somebody to understand the situation we're in, but really all we need to understand is that God understands the situation that we're in. That He understands where we are. And to trust Him, to have faith in Him, to live with less fear. Fear less. Don't you just love it when the Lord lays something? I actually had to write this down because I said, Lord, there's no way I'm going to remember that. So I kind of jotted it down, but I put it on my notes. But this is good. If you're taking notes, write this down. Excessive fear is caused when our source of security is not strong enough to sustain us. Excessive fear is caused when our source of security is not strong enough to sustain us. We have to understand that He is everything we need that can sustain us. He can sustain our finances. He can sustain our marriages. He can sustain our ministries. He can sustain our churches. He can sustain whatever He wants to sustain. We can't put it in ourselves to have to help sustain anything. And it goes on in verse 19. And it says, Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. And literally that could be translated, and the expression on his face changed. You can imagine the anger in his face and his voice. When they were brought to him and not bowing down, he was mad, but he had been given the velvet glove approach, or they had been given the velvet glove approach. He tried to woo them to the other side. You remember reading that? He said, now when you hear the music, you hear all of this, and you're ready to fall down and worship the image I've made, that's very good. You can have everything back. So he's trying to use the velvet glove approach. But in the face of their unshaken devotion, the staggering commitment to face death rather than disobey God, Nebuchadnezzar lost control. How many times are we there? We have a friend, we're in this group, and man, they're trying everything they can to they're our buddies and they're hanging out, and man, it's good, right? And then they want to go and to whatever it is, party scene, they want to go do something, they want to go hang out, they want to go do all this, and then you say, you know what, I'm not going. It's not me. You know? It's not that I don't love them anymore, we don't love them anymore any less, it's just that we don't need to be in that situation. But then what happens whenever we tell them no and we can't do it? They turn their back on us, right? I mean, that's what happens. You know, it probably happens more in school than anywhere. You know, maybe not so much in our adult lives, but in school, I know it happens every day. That because, you know, this kid doesn't want to go do the things that his buddies want to do, well, his group of buddies turn their back on him or on her. You know, and that's what happens. They turn their backs on us because it's something that we know that we're using discernment. We're using that discernment to say, you know what, I can't. I know better than that. And I can't do it. But that's okay. That's okay. So his attitude towards them changed, right? And he ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. I'm assuming that 7 times in the ancient world was like just meant really hot, or really turn it up a lot, right? So Nebuchadnezzar's saying, I want you to crank that furnace as hot as you can make it. So you can imagine these 3 young men facing what looks to be their final moment. They have been faithful to the end. They've seen the end coming since they first heard about the command to bow down before a statue of gold. Every exit has been closed. There are no other options. But they have been faithful to the end. They've been faithful. They said, you know what? I mean, could you imagine you're there with your three buddies, right? All right, there's hundreds of people everywhere. I mean, they're looking at this big gold statue. And you're there with your buddies, and I mean, you've always got those buddies, right? That's, you know, you're standing there, and Chad, Shaq, and Abe, they're hanging out, and they're going, man, what did he just say? Did he just say it? Did he just really say that? And then you've got, you know, Shadrach. I'm just going to say he's probably the leader because he's always the first one that they talk about. But so he bows down first, and his buddies are going, man, or starts to bow down. You know, so he goes down. He's like, man, can't do that. What are you doing? You can't do that. You know, so you can just imagine that he's going, man, get yourself back up. I'll smack you in the back of the head. You try to get us in trouble like that. Did you hear what he said? He said he's going to throw us in a fire. You know, so you can see the conversation going on, right? They're people. I mean, put yourself in that situation. They're normal guys like us. I mean, I'll be honest with you. If I was sitting down there with two of you guys and he said bow or you're getting thrown in the furnace, I'd be like, man, I'll ask for forgiveness. I'm getting down here, you know. But thankfully, they had Abe was probably the one going, man, get your butt back up here because I'm not bowing down to this. Because here's the thing. There's two kinds of fear. You've got good fear and bad fear. I think good fear is the fear of the Lord. You got to fear the Lord, right? That was the good fear they had. They feared the Lord enough to know that said, you know what? They said it right there. It said, look, no matter what you do to us, we're going to stand our ground. We're not bowing down. The bad fear is, you know, Shadrach was going, man, this fear's got me. I'm bowing down. That's bad fear. Fear that entangles us so much that makes us do things that we shouldn't do. We've all been there. You know, fear of fitting in and fear of doing these things. And man, it entraps us, right? So it says every exit is closed. There's no way out of it, but they've stayed faithful. They are real people filled with courage, right? Maybe some fear, defiance, and faith. The thing is, here's the attitude they have. The Lord gave me this too. This is good. They have the faith. They have this attitude that says, my fear will not strangle my faith. My fear will not strangle my faith. My faith is strong enough to overcome any of this fear. You know, here they are. They feel the heat. They see the men who carried them to this furnace. They see these men just like collapse, right? Probably, I mean, if it's heated 7 times, you've seen paper get close enough to a fire, it just engulfs. I mean, it doesn't have to be in the flame. It just gets hot enough that it engulfs it in flame. And I have to assume that the guards that were taking them, as they were bound, the guards that were taking them to the furnace, they just collapse. The fire's so hot, before they even get there, they collapse. So here we go. They feel the heat. They see these guys die from the flame, and here they are. They're in it. They're in the fire. They're in it, right? And they wait. They're waiting for the pain. They're waiting for the numbness. They're waiting for the smoke inhalation. Waiting for them to suffocate, and nothing's happening, right? They don't feel any different, and it begins to dawn on them that they're not even warm. There's no smoke. There's no restraints. There's nothing. And here's the thing that really, I was talking to Pastor Tim this morning, and here's the thing that really just jumped out at me at this. So they've been bound. They've been put in these strap, whatever. I don't know what they used to bound them then, but they've been bound. What's the first thing that happens to them when they get in the fire? They get released. They get freed from that. So here's the Lord. The Lord used what they thought was going to be bad, and He just used it for their good. He just freed them of that bondage. Amen. How many times do you know that getting into the fire means that we're going to be free to that bondage, that free to those things that entrap us? It fires me up when I think about how God uses these words to speak life into us. And man, it's so good. And here, this is not the best part. The best part is what happens to turn this from a miracle to a divine encounter. In verse 24, then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement. One translation has the word trepidation because this indicates an element of fear. So here's a guy that had no fear. He was the king. And all of a sudden God shows up and fear shows up. He asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw in the fire? So he's standing there, John, he's going, hey man, we threw 3 people in that fire and I see 4. Who's that 4th guy? Hang on a minute. He looks like a son of God. Come on now.
Yeah. Come on, Corey.
When Jesus shows up on the scene, everybody knows who he is. He's standing there and he's thinking, man, I don't know about y'all, but man, fear has gripped me. The Lord has said, man, I'm gripping this man's heart. I'm changing this man. And man, he stands there and he's like, man, I don't know. I threw 3 people in there. There's 4 people in there. And this can't be good. But fear grabbed him. The good fear grabbed him. He started to fear the Lord. And this is that moment that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because all the work they had done, everything that they had lived up for to this point in their life was coming to fruition. The Lord put in their path and the Lord put in their calendar. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But the Lord put in their calendar that said, I've got a date with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is on my calendar right here with King Nebuchadnezzar, and they're going to change his heart because of me. And I've got a date with destiny. And that's what we have to understand. You know, just like Cheyenne talked a while ago, man, she brought a great word that we have to be ready to hand off the baton. We've got to hand that baton off and do the work for the kingdom. It doesn't matter what's going on in our lives or what we're going through, but we've got to be ready to hand it off. But man, that's so good. And they replied, certainly, O king. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire bound, unbound, and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of God. Like I said, man, when Jesus shows up, he shows up and everybody knows who he is. So there's a 4th member of the furnace club, right? And he is unharmed and apparently the one who delivered the other 3. He convened a little meeting right there in the furnace. Who was this 4th man? We don't know. But we see a king that said, hey man, this is the Son of God. For me, I got to say it was Jesus. Jesus showed up on the scene. It might have been before Jesus, but hey, God's got a plan. God's got a plan. But see, I think about that and man, we get so trapped by fear and so wrapped up in these things and man, God just wants to meet us in the furnace. He says He just wants to meet us there. I want you to go through the fire because I'm in the fire. I'm here with you. I just need you to be here with me. And so many times we get so stuck in that we don't want to go with the fire. We don't want to deal with that. Right? The text doesn't say, but again, I think it was Jesus. Apparently they spent a little time together in the furnace. Man, this is good. When you think about this, man, just think about the conversation that was going on inside this furnace. I mean, here they are, standing there with the Son of God. Somebody that's delivered them. You know, I wonder what they said to each other. You know, I wonder if the 4th man in the furnace told them how proud the Father was of their loyalty, devotion, and love. I wonder if he told them that because this one act of faithfulness, their names would be remembered for thousands of years throughout the history of the earth. I wonder if he told them for centuries all over the world, men and women who face suffering and persecution, trial or even death would be strengthened by hearing their story. See, so many times we think about this as being the children's story. Man, it's got a message for us too. It's not just for the children, it's for us too. There's no age limit to what God has to say to us. There's no age limit. I wonder if He told them that. I wonder if He said, I wonder what they said to Him. I mean, we think about those times, and what would we say? What would we say when we truly come in the physical presence of the Lord? I bet they poured out adoration, gratitude, and worship. I have to think they did. They're standing in a fire that they should have been goners. I have to think that we've heard Pastor Tim talk about it. I have to think that that's what worship looks like. I have to think that gratitude and adoration and just thankful, Lord, I've been in the fire. I'm going to go through another fire. I know somebody's going to go through a fire, but we're going to come out of it and we're not going to smell like smoke. We're not going to be burned, and we're going to be just fine because we have faith in you, Lord, that you're going to get us through it. So they came to this place, the plain of Dura, planning to withhold worship from the false god, and they ended up worshiping as they had never done in their lives. And that's just like worship is. The furnace, which looked like the end of their lives, turned out to be the greatest thing they had ever experienced. It was the can't-miss event of their whole lives. The furnace turns out to be the place where they met God, and God meets us in the furnace too, just like I said a while ago. God didn't deliver Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the furnace. He delivered them from the furnace. He delivered them from it. He met them there, and that's how He's going to do with us. He delivers us from it. So here's the point of the story. They hoped to be delivered from the furnace, but God decided to deliver them in the furnace. Sometimes God delivers people from the furnace, but sometimes God delivers people in the furnace. Jesus said to them what He says to people still today: I'll meet you in the furnace, because He is a furnace kind of guy. I mean, you know that Jesus says, you know what? I'll meet you there. It doesn't matter how hot it is or how bad it is, I'm going to meet you there. Maybe somebody's in a situation now where, you know what, they said, I'm in such a bad situation, bad time in my life, that there's no way Jesus could be here or God could be here. He's there. We just don't see Him. Just like the pieces of paper with fear on them. A lot of times we don't understand fears right next to us. It's right there in our back pocket. And we just don't even realize it and how much it's got us entangled. The place where full devotion can lead you that looks scary and dangerous and painful, and maybe even like the end, turns out to be where Jesus is. And amazingly enough, is the safest place of all. It turns out to be the adventure of a lifetime. Jesus said what He says to people still: I'll meet you in that furnace. Follow me. It's going to look dark. It's going to look dangerous. It's going to scare you. But you keep following me, and I'll meet you in the furnace. He just tells us He tells us, follow me. I'm not telling you it's going to be a bed of roses. I'm not telling you it's going to be an easy life. I'm just telling you to follow me. Just have faith in me. That's something that I've had to really, really struggle with, is putting my faith in Him to know that He's got a bigger and better plan for my life. Because for me, I've messed my life up for 30-something years. I tried living my own life and tried doing my own thing. And was it all bad times? No, I had some great times. But my great times today triumph those times. Because here's the thing. All those good times I was having from temporary pleasures and all these things, the good times and the things that I get from the Lord, that spiritual high, man, it lasts. It lasts days. It lasts weeks. And I can just keep going back for more. I don't get a headache from it. I don't feel bad when I wake up in the morning. It's good. It's good. Verse 26, it says, Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. Wouldn't you love to see this? They're walking out of there. all the governors, the satraps, the prefects, all of them standing around. They're probably walking out like this. Yeah. My God did that. Chest bowed out. Probably looked like me. Probably may not have had any hair. It may have got their hair. I don't know. They saw that the fire had not harmed them, nor was a hair on their head singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there were no smell of fire on them. And then Nebuchadnezzar says in verse 28, Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's commands. They trusted in God and defied king's commands. Who's the king? Nebuchadnezzar? This man killed his soldiers, and his carelessness didn't even register with him. And now he congratulates Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego for having the audacity to defy his authority. We think about that, just like I said a while ago, man. Jesus showed up and he changed him. And here he is that he thinks that everybody should be bowed down, worshiping him. And he's saying, you know what? Praise be to God that these men are walking out of here. So something's going on in this man's life. It says, Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who said anything about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses turned into piles of rubble. Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar was not really big on freedom of worship, the worship deal, and he's not a big Bill of Rights guy. I mean, when you think about that. For no other God can save this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. He didn't just restore them, he lifts them up to new positions and gives them more opportunities to influence and to contribute. Now I wonder what the rest of their lives will look like. We don't know. It is the last time they were ever mentioned in Scripture. I wonder if they ever thought how easily they might have missed this adventure. I was telling Tim this morning that so many times we come up to a circumstance and we come up to a situation. And we come up to that situation and that circumstance and we get scared. We get feared, afraid. And what do? Because of that, we go around it. Right? We go around that situation. Doesn't matter how long it takes us to get around that situation. You know, Tim gave me something this morning. I'm going to steal it from him. You know, when they were wandering around in the desert, you know, God knew that because they were going to face that battle, that they would get scared to death, but He took them around the long way. You know, He took them around the long way, and so many times that's what happens. We get so scared of the fear, so it takes us around it. But God wants to bring us through it. Instead of getting to that situation and that moment, and God is saying, I need you in the fire, we choose to go around that situation because fear entangles us and fear grabs us. We have to fear less. Fear less enough, have more faith to know that God's going to deliver us through the fire. You know, I wonder, when we look back on this situation, you know, I think this is kind of funny how when we look at this, we think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Do you think that they were sitting around years later, say, and they still had their robes, right? You know, I've still got, I guess we hang on to those things that we cherish, you know. I've still got football jerseys from high school. But you think about, they had these robes, and they'd get those robes out every now and again, and they'd share with their wives, you know, hey, look at this. This thing doesn't even smell like smoke. I had this situation. And they shared. You know, we think about those times, but I just have to really think about this and know that they never forgot that moment. That is ingrained in their heads. How many of you in the room, don't raise your hands, but how many in this room, God's delivered you from something and you'll always remember that moment. You'll always remember, heck, some of you may remember the time, the date, the seconds, down to the very last minute. You know, I have to think that's what these guys were thinking. You know, we all find ourselves in that furnace. You know, going into the furnace, which looked like the last thing they wanted to do, turned out to be the greatest event of their lives that they could share They had to, think about, Christmas morning, they're sitting around, probably with their grandkids, tell them all about the situation, right? They're just people. We forget that. They're people. They had to have shared that. The furnace that looked like death turned out to be the safest place for them. Why? Because God was there. Sometimes God delivers people from the furnace, but sometimes God delivers in the furnace. And those are the greatest times in your life. We study all this because there's a great danger for the followers of Christ. There's great danger for us living in this comfortable world. The danger is that the primary goal of my life becomes furnace avoidance, is what I pray. God, deliver me from the pain, the discomfort, suffering, and inconvenience. Make my life smooth. Make it easy. Make it an easy life. Make life comfortable. Make it pleasant. Remove obstacles from me. We want to avoid even the low-level flames. But God calls us to a dangerous life and to fear less, as He did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because He has something better for us. If the band would go ahead and make their way up. As I talked about a while ago, I'm pretty sure God doesn't have a calendar. Because He's He's omniscient and omnipresent. But if He did, just like I said a while ago, He writes these things down that, I've got a meeting with Daniel in the lion's den on this date, and I've got to be there. No matter what my schedule looks like, I've got a meeting with Him right now. And I have to think that, when David was going to face Goliath and God said, you know what, guys, I got to break off this lunch meeting. I got a meeting with David. Man, I got to be there. He's fighting a big old giant and nobody believes in him, and I'm not sure he can stand up, but I've got to be there. And I say all that to say this. Where are you on God's calendar? Where are you on His calendar? Consider doing something dangerous. Stop asking for less heat for an easier, more pleasant, more secure life. There is something better. Maybe you have a Nebuchadnezzar at your work and God wants to use you to change his heart. Just like I said, there was a time such as that God knew and had ordained the moment for that reason. He knew that by going into the fire, that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was going to go in that fire, and that it was going to change Nebuchadnezzar's life. And that's where God puts us. God puts us in situations because we're on His calendar in that moment, because there's somebody and something in our lives in that moment that He's using us. We're tools, we're instruments. As Lloyd likes to say, we're Swiss Army knives. We need to be everything, be every tool. We need to be used for God's kingdom. And we're on God's calendar because we might be in a situation that we think is horrible, that we're not going to get out of, and we're not going to be able to make it through. But God's put us on His calendar because He said, you know what? I know Tim, he might think about giving up. He's going to be in a situation to give up. But he's got heart. He's not going to bow down. And by me using him as a tool, there's somebody else that He's going to reach on the other side. There's somebody else that needs to know me that I'm going to use him for. Maybe you need to stop praying for deliverance from the furnace and ask for the presence of God who meets people there. Maybe there's a Nebuchadnezzar that God wants to reach through you. You ought to quit praying to try to get away from him and ask God to meet you in the furnace. Get involved in a service or a ministry. You know, I never thought that the Lord would use me Just an ordinary person that tried my best to mess up my life. But God had me on His calendar to say, you know what? There's a student ministry that's going to need him. I can't make any sense of it, because if it were up to me, I wouldn't be there. I love those kids. Love them like they're my own. But I know that God's got a plan for me. That God has put me in a ministry to be the head of, to reach kids that need Him. God's put me in a church to reach people that need Him. God's put me in a position to understand that it's not about me. It's about Him. It's about bringing people to the kingdom. It's about knowing that we've got enough faith to fear less, and to have faith to understand that we can do the things that He calls us to do. I want to share this with you. And I share it because I am who I am, right? We all need to be that way. We don't need to change. We don't need to change who we are because of what somebody's going to think. Students, listen to me. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you wear. It doesn't matter how you talk or listen to me. It doesn't matter. God's made you the way He made you for a reason and for a purpose. But I had an opportunity to, and I share this because it was a fear of mine that gripped me before I went and did this. And I had the opportunity to go and be a part of a revival, my first revival in July. And man, I fought all week and weekend leading up to it. Because I said, Lord, it's a good friend of mine, and he reached out to me. He said, man, the Lord's laid you on my heart, and I want you to come help me with revival. And I was like, Lord, it's a Baptist church, and I don't know enough about the Word. I don't know enough to be able to go and stand up there in front of them and preach your Word. Not to mention that, Lord, I don't have a suit. And I don't have the money to go buy a suit for every day I need to be there. So man, I struggled with it and fought with it and prayed about it. And finally the Lord said, good Lord, man, what are you whining about? He called you to come be a part of His revival because of who you are. He didn't call you because of the way you look or what you wear or what you dress like. He called you because of who you are. He called you because He knew in His heart that you've got a relationship with me and it's about me anyway. Why are you making it about yourself? I said, Lord, they're Baptists. You understand this if anybody should. So man, I prayed about it and I said, you know what? I'm going to go to church. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to go on my blue jeans. I'll wear a button-up shirt. And if they like me, they like me. If they don't, they don't. The Lord said, just go. And man, I went over there first couple nights, and man, the Lord showed up. And I'll tell you, He used that revival to grow me. Quit being a baby about what I was wearing. But I got over there, and every night I wore blue jeans. I didn't wear my Converse because I thought that would be a little too much for the Baptists. They're holy shoes. Just deal with it. I'm a youth pastor. I can do this. But, you know, I was so scared. I was so afraid. And I had to get a couple messages ready to, throughout the week. They use me. And I'd preach, and I'd go up there in my rolled up sleeves, button up shirt, blue jeans, dress shoes. About the second night in, one of the pastors over there, Kevin Holman, some of you may know him, he pastors Solid Rock up in Cleveland. And we're sitting there on the front row, and he said, man, I had a bone to pick with you. And I said, You've only known me for a couple of days. What'd I do? I'm thinking, oh, Lord, here we go. I've said something. I did something last night. I think I might have preached the night before or something. I said, man, I said something. I don't know. So he said, my daughter, I got home, man, she gave me the 3rd degree. I said, why? He said, because she asked me, why can't you dress like the guy that's been up there all week? Why do you have to wear a suit? He's wearing blue jeans and a button-up shirt. He said, so I want to thank you for that. So we rocked on, and we got through the revival. And the last night, I was standing in the bedroom, and I was really struggling on wearing, I said, I don't have a suit, but I can wear slacks and not my Converse. I said, I can wear a suit or slacks and dress shirt. And I said, and the Lord said, you know what? Why? You are who you are. You've gone just like you were all week. Just go. So I went, and we had a great revival. And I say all that because fear tried its best to keep me from being who I am. And I had to understand that God was using me to be who I am. God calls us. He says, come as you are. He don't say, get your mess fixed, get your stuff fixed, and get all this fixed. He said, come as you are. And I think many times we lose sight of seeing that vision, and we're getting all jacked up over it. But we're going to come to a close. I want to tell you this. Kevin, the guy that gave me the hard time, he called me probably about 2 or 3 weeks after that. And I will admit, there was actually a guy that stood up during this service and actually apologized to me because he said he was closed off. He was distracted. But the Lord had that on His calendar for me to change him for the way that and that was it. But Kevin called me, probably a few weeks later, and he said, "Man, if there's one thing that I can say that I'm so proud of you for," he said, "you didn't change who you were. You came just like you were, and that you didn't let anything change you." So I challenge you. No matter what fear is trying to grip you today, next week, next month, whatever it is, know that you've got faith. Don't let fear strangle your faith. Keep your faith in the Lord. Your final moment is going to come. I don't know what furnace you're facing. I don't know what this means for you. I just know who will meet you there. And He says, "Fear not, though you pass through the flames, that they will not burn you. They will not destroy you," He says. And then He says, "Man, I'm going to take this. I'm going to run with it. I'll meet you in the furnace." He tells us all that. I'm going to meet you in the furnace. If you bow your heads and let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, I want to take a moment to give glory where glory is due. Lord, I don't know what someone may be dealing with this morning, Lord. Lord, but you know. Lord, I don't know who this message was for, Lord.